Joining me right now is the Commerce Secretary, Wilbur Ross. Mr. Secretary, it's always a pleasure to see you.
Good to see you, Maria.
Thanks so much for joining us. So, do you expect, where are we on USMCA?
Well, we're within inches, maybe millimeters of a deal. I think the remarkable thing is that it took so long to make such small changes insisted on by the Democrats. In effect, they gave Trumka, the leader of the union, veto power over the House of Representatives. That seems weird.
So what tweaks were made?
Well, we have to see the very final document because it's still being drafted, but tweaks were in the area of labor enforcement. Now, the joke there is that the NAFTA agreement had no enforcement provisions, so anything here would be better than what was in NAFTA. Second, some tweaks to digital commerce, liability questions, fairly technical issues. And third, they were complaining about the amount of years protection biologics would get against generics coming in.
Right. So I know that the Republicans wanted 10 years so that a company can hold on to the patent for 10 years. What is that number now within USMCA?
Well, they're talking about a smaller number. But remember, in the U.S., it's longer than 10 years anyway. So this is a lot of commotion about fairly small changes. And I think it's set up so that they can claim they played a role in the negotiation.
Secretary, do you expect that we're going to see her bring it to the floor this week?
Well, it'll have to be this week or very shortly thereafter if we're going to have it. I think from their point of view, the timing is quite important in that here's this devastating report about the FBI and the way they mishandled everything relating to the Trump campaign. Convenient to have some news to distract people.
Yeah. Someone was telling me, one of my sources in Washington said to me that they could do it simultaneously and have a vote in the House as well as the Senate, to make it fast passage. Is that what you would envision, that it's a simultaneous vote so that it actually could get to the president's desk sooner rather than later?
Well, we want it there as soon as possible. Every day that it isn't approved is a day delayed in the benefits to America. The 176,000 new jobs aren't going to get created until the USMCA goes in. All the other improvements, the $34 billion investment in the auto industry, that won't happen until USMCA goes through. A whole host of things. So every day is money out of average Americans' pocket.
It sounds like this deal could be one of the biggest victories for President Trump.
Oh, I think it is. It's an enormous deal. This is the largest trade deal in the history, not just of the U.S., but as far as I can tell, of the whole world.
And then, Secretary, there's China. And we know that this deadline in terms of the tariffs is upcoming this Sunday. Agricultural Secretary Sonny Perdue said yesterday that he does not believe that the planned tariffs will be implemented against China this Sunday. The new tariffs, of course, would hit an additional $160 billion worth of Chinese goods, including toys and smartphones, and that would take effect this Sunday. How do you see this playing out?
Well, the important thing is to get a proper deal with China. Whether we get it the day before December 15th, the day after, or a week after is much less important than getting the right deal. President Trump's in a very good negotiating position. Our economy is booming. You saw the 266,000 jobs created in the most recent month. China's economy has got its problems. So every day that goes by, we're in a better negotiating position.
Well, I think you make a really good point, because we got those incredible numbers on Friday, 266,000 jobs. And then you look at what's happening in Canada, for example.
Right.
They cut 70+ thousand jobs. I mean, what a number. Unemployment rate of up to 5.9%, 6%. Germany is in recession.
Right.
Europe is slowing. So once again, the U.S. is turning, really is the gem of the world. Does that continue in 2020?
Well, we are the engine that's driving the world right now, because China is slowing down. Europe, as you mentioned, has got its own problems. Strangely, one of the fastest growing countries in Europe is Greece, as they're coming out of their recession. But U.S. is a big driving force, and that's great. It's wonderful for us to be the part of the world that grows rapidly.
Once you get China done, even if it's just a phase one, and you get USMCA done, is the thinking that you turn your attention to Europe in terms of trade issues there, or is it a different trade deal?
Well, remember, you have the whole question of how Brexit comes out. The easiest trade deal for us to make is probably with the UK. Their economy is much more similar to ours than either of ours is to the EU. So that would be an easy deal to make, and a very friendly deal because we're on such good terms with the UK. And the importance of that is then EU will eventually have to make a deal with the combination of US and UK.
Are you and your colleagues okay with doing a phase one deal with China that does not include the enforcement of intellectual property theft?
Well, we're having very good discussions on intellectual property, and it's more than just the theft. It's the forced technology transfers, it's the equal competition, it's procurement regulations, it's a whole lot of things. There may be some of that addressed in the ultimate phase one, but for the most part, the harder issues are for later on.
So will phase one be largely about trade, China buying more agricultural products?
Yes, it'll be largely about trade.
And opening up market access to
Hopefully. Well, market access is tied to the commitment to purchase 40 to 50 billion more of agricultural goods. Now, that 40 to 50 billion is looking more and more like they have to do it anyway. They've already been forced to raise the price of pork 50% since August. For a poor country to have a 50% increase in one of the staples of their protein diet is a big, big deal.
I was told by one source that there are 250 million sick pigs in China because of the swine flu, and they just sent them to the slaughterhouse, and they're making meat.
Well, they do, but as you
even though they're sick, because you can't get sick from a diseased pig.
Sure. Well, as you kill the pig, now what do you do next year? The dead pigs don't breed.
Wow. Unbelievable. What a story that is. I want to ask you about intellectual property as it relates to these new rules that China just came out with. You saw the Financial Times story, obviously, yesterday. The FT reporting that China's government has ordered all state offices to remove foreign hardware and software within 3 years. Analysts expect that the 20 to 30 million pieces of equipment would be need to be replaced and could affect U.S. firms like Microsoft, Dell, Hewlett-Packard. But what I really found interesting is this Gordon Chang piece, who says, after all of these cybersecurity rules are in place, no foreign company may encrypt data so that it cannot be read by the Chinese central government and the Communist Party of China. In other words, businesses will be required to turn over their encryption keys. What is the impact of this?
Well, I think it's a worse impact on the Chinese people than it is on anybody else. This whole business is really a response to the rulings we've made on Huawei, both what Commerce did and what the FCC did, requiring the Huawei equipment to be ripped out of the rural telecom. So it's partly that. It's also so it's retaliatory. It's also showing that China doesn't want there to be any chance of any data about any people that escapes its control, its notice, its surveillance.
Unbelievable.
It's a horrible thing from a civil rights point of view.
So how does American business deal with that? Because Gordon Chang writes, Chinese officials will be permitted under Chinese law to share seized information with state enterprises.
Well, remember, it's been the law for quite a while that Chinese businesses, including private businesses, have to cooperate with the People's Liberation Army and with the security forces, and they're required not to disclose that they're doing so. That's a horrible feature. So this is just a continuation of that same behavior.
So it sounds like you're not worried about these new rules. This is a huge day, Secretary.
Well, it's a huge day. It's a winning day for the president. The Inspector General report finding 17 so-called mistakes in the FISA applications. It's terrible.
Well, I mean, they used and manipulated data to get a warrant to spy on Carter Page, to get a window into the Trump campaign,
right.
and even after the president was inaugurated, which was
right.
quite extraordinary. And I know that William Barr has pushed back on the conclusions of the IG report.
I think the real report is going to be the Dunham report.
John Durham,
because that's what's going to deal with indictments and real action. The IG report said, well, we couldn't really prove that there was bias. Well, when people write horrible emails attacking the president, and then they alter documents and they leave out bits of exculpatory evidence, what more do you need to connect the dots?
Exactly. USMCA, what does it mean to GDP, real quick?
Well, it's going to be very good for GDP. It favors